We'll watch this after. Okay. This lawyer guy might want to chat about some bull. We can do audio and video or just audio, whatever your preference is. Okay, this is mainly for my audience. Sam Hyde fans are going to be similar to gripers, and that they're very big on like the gay op stuff, like faking, like astroturfing and stuff like that. And they're also like very, very, very active on Twitter. They're very active in YouTube comment sections. They are very big on that. So this is a fan base that is hyper engaged in social media stuff, just to be aware of it. For the neo-Nazis, Elon, I don't have much to say on this. Okay. I probably shouldn't use, so people, I'm responding to criticisms coming from people that aren't even serious people. But when I'm using the term Nazi here, like I'm expressing that I feel like these are like neo-Nazi type views. I'm not trying to normatively load it, although I understand that's like a silly thing to say, I guess, in retrospect, because people always view you as when you say Nazi, you just mean like bad. I'm not trying to say Nazi equals bad, or just because it's Nazi, it's bad or whatever. I'm just trying to like accurately express the views. Maybe saying Nazi triggers some people, and I'm saying that dismissively, but I can understand why it would sound dismissive, but I am going through everything he's saying, and I'm trying to give an analysis of the things that he's saying. I'm not just saying like, oh, he's a Nazi and so he's bad, but I'm just saying like, this is neo-Nazism. Like this is like a one-to-one mapping of like, there is like a certain ethnic character of the nation. We have to dispel everybody that's not of this ethnic character. Jews are primarily behind the displacement of white people. Like all of these things are like, these are all like neo-Nazi things. So that's the only reason I bring this up. But if I was just trying to be dismissive with the word, I was like, oh, he's a Nazi, and then just not engage with it. But yeah. Yeah, fuck. That's really all I had to say on that. I don't know why I even put that in my title. But I noticed that a lot of people were ass-pained over Jesus Christ. This guy wants to argue over a Supreme Court thing. Wasn't that U.S. doctrine even before the Nazis? To blame the Jews for all of societal ills and to have like racial supremacy such that you're trying to like literally enforce a racially homogenous society by putting other people in death camps and stuff? No, it wasn't. No, it was not. Somebody linked this for him being born mask off.
I don't understand it. Like, I would never, like, I'm a Catholic boy.
Mm-hmm. It's not a religion. It's not a religious
I'm a Canadian boy.
It's an ethnic thing. They have the highest, good God, that is frightening. That is a chilling, that is a frightening visage.
I wish I saw her in real life. I try to her and I'd call my wife first. I'd be like, hey, Jess, is it cool if I try to Amy Schumer? She'd be like, yeah, go ahead, have it.
They have the highest in-group loyalty, and they have a high enough IQ to disguise that in-group.
These are all, I'm assuming he's talking about Jews. Also, like, just because I've heard it's exhausting how much I've heard all these talking points. In-group loyalty is something that's often said about Jewish people. While they're trying to undermine the white race, they're also very loyal to their own group of people. It's supposed to demonstrate the hypocrisy of Jewish people by saying they tell white people that you need to be more accepting and you need to outbreed with other ethnic groups. Meanwhile, Jewish people are incredibly loyal, and they only in-group breed, so they know that there's an advantage to doing it because of their in-group loyalty, while they try to destroy the in-group loyalty of white people. I'm pretty sure if you look up the numbers, I think that Jewish women are actually out marrying at like higher rates, but the idea that this is some sort of like, even if they weren't, the idea of this being like a planned approach to redesigning society is a far jump from, even if some people do marry in-group more, it's just
group loyalty quite well.
I guess I think in-group loyalty is fucking clear.
Well, there's a case to be made for that, but unfortunately, if you don't have high in-group loyalty, you
get eliminated,
genetically doomed to be eradicated from the face of the earth as a group.
Really?
Yeah.
As a group, though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just ancient biblical warfare still happening to this day, just under different names.
It's
explain why someone like Asmongold should take the silly Nazi stuff seriously. Maybe. I think that Sam Hyde does a good enough job, like kind of dressing it up into just kind of like economically populist messaging, so it sounds good. Remember, like any good ideology, it's going to be like an abusive person I'm negative about all this. Like, there's not always like an abuser is not always bad, right? There's usually going to be some good aspect to an abuser. Otherwise, people wouldn't be attracted to them. But I mean, it's the same thing with like Nazi shit too. Like, Hitler wasn't wrong about everything. You know, like they're going to make points that are going to resonate with everybody to some extent. It's just a matter of how well they can disguise some things and celebrate other things, I guess.
It's tribal warfare, and it's kind of seems unavoidable. I think it's unavoidable. The fact that tribal warfare is a thing. I mean, it happens in nature all the time. It happens with fucking trees. Do it. Trees favor other trees with they share nutrients, I think, and they favor trees that are more genetically similar to them than trees that are not.
Yeah,
so
like birch trees don't fuck with any of the trees.
That's just the way of nature. And white people, I think, are currently getting beat down pretty hard with white guilt, and that's why they have this one reason why they have this lowered in-group loyalty, I think.
For now. We'll see if it'll change.
Yeah, we'll see.
But I guess the question is like, when you say it's not going away, right? How do you see it like playing out? You think we're just gonna get dragged into the 3?
I don't know. I think it's if I was Brazilian, I'd be pretty fucking worried right now because on Twitter they're getting like dragged. Like Twitter is like the Nazi. It's like Nazi. What the fuck? It's leftists that are doing. Twitter is like in my opinion, Twitter is a pretty. It seems pretty well representative of what people actually think now. And whether you like it or not, the black people that I follow on Twitter, the white people, the racists that I follow on Twitter, the stuff that they're saying, it doesn't seem like there's anything really out of whack. Like there's any messages that are getting boosted too much on Twitter, like out of proportion to the way people feel. And it just seems the vibe, the temperature right now, is that people really don't like
Brazilian.
And it seems like it's getting safer and safer to say that. And
This means Jews, right?
Model.
Never thought I'd see the day.
I never thought I'd see the day. This model comparing Israel to Nazis. It's Israel that they say the issues with, but Israel is
Brazilian.
Jews,
so if I was just not looking good, man. If I was
Brazilian.
I'd be worried.
Good.
That's what I mean. It's not going away.
Good.
Welcome to the party. That's the only thing you can say.
Well, I mean,
are they really gonna like American Brazilians? Like, nothing's gonna happen to them.
well, no, that's not true.
I think a few of them get canceled.
Amy Schumer's not going to be killed, but everything is interdependent on everything else, and for, fucking 100 years, the kind of controlled media, or been at the position of the highest position of power in media.
I'm ceasing to see the. I don't know. I'm stupid. Remember, I'm the mayonnaise guy. So there's a big bowl in my head.
Why it's a bad thing?
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it feels like there's a huge change brewing.
Oh yeah,
and it's just ooh, freaky.
See, I guess I saw it like that the whole time. I feel like people could have saw that the whole time. I guess I didn't. I was expecting like the plumbers and everybody to be like, "Come on!" And then yo.
You think that Nick is as far right as Sam Hyde? I can't tell. Sam Hyde is a full retread of 2016 era neo-Nazi talking points. Fuentes seems to be a bit more in the ethnic nationalist kind of thing. He's a bit more not as Nazi as Sam Hyde. However, there's also the fact that Nazis, my understanding of it, my remembrance of it is Nazis hate Catholics. Holy fuck, they hate Catholics. And Fuentes is very much a Catholic, right? Fuentes is very much like a Catholic nationalist person, I think, right? Isn't Fuentes a big Catholic church guy, or am I making that up, or was he just Christian? I know they called it Christian nationalism, but wasn't Fuentes a big Catholic guy? I think he is, right? Yeah, okay, yeah. Nazis, neo-Nazis hate Catholicism and hate Catholics.
Oh, you don't know Brazilian Hollywood? And they're like, what? I watched Texas Ranger. And you're like, oh shit, I didn't even know. Oh, I'm on the retard side.
I just assume everything's intentional. I have a different sort of take on these things, and I assume that the allowing of this pushback to happen is intentional, and will push backs closer to the wall and make the reprisal more extreme. I just assume everything is scripted. You know how
I think. When you assume that everything's intentional and scripted, what you're assuming is that people have that.
Isn't it the KKK that hates Catholics, not Nazis? No, Nazis hated them too. Hitler hated Catholics. Yeah.
Someone somewhere has the ability to perfectly plan something, and what have we ever planned that's gone even 50% the way that we thought it would?
I guess nothing.
Literally nothing.
Nothing.
And even World Peace 2 was successful, but it wasn't successful because anybody planned it that way. It was successful because ingredients and things came together organically, and we hadn't lost our.
Hey, hello. Are you able to hear me? Wait, hello? I can hear you, but you can't hear me. I can hear you, but you can't hear me. That's my best sign language for today. He said 1 second.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my headphones are not working. I'm going to grab another set of headphones so I can actually hear you. I'll be back in 30.
30 minutes? The fuck? That's crazy, chat.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello, hello?
I still don't hear you.
Is the I don't know. I don't know who I'm talking to.
Let's see. Let me turn my audio output. Oh, figured it out.
Oh, hello, hello? Can you hear me?
There we go. Now we got it.
Cool. Hi.
How are you?
Doing great. How you doing?
I'm good. Let me just switch my camera or my video so I can see you. Well, I'm surprised you answered.
Yeah, I'm always,
You're terminally online, huh? As advertised.
Quite literally, it's my job to be. So, do you want to give people a background real quick on who you are and what we're chatting about today?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Zachary Worrell. I'm a relatively new attorney. I run my own practice here. I do election law and real estate stuff, but academically, my passion's always been constitutional law and legal history.
Okay.
And before this, sorry, I'm a little out of breath from running up and down the stairs.
No, you're good.
But before law school, I was a political consultant, largely in Virginia. And my claim to fame in that world was unseating the House Majority Leader Eric Cantor in 2014 in that large upset where he spent $12 million and we spent $200,000. So I feel like I have relevant legal training and some political chops as well to, have a substantive discussion on the matter.
Okay. And then just, I'm live streaming all that, right?
Yep.
Cool.
We're good.
Okay. Okay. So I think apparently you heard my 14th Amendment takes. You were not happy and you wanted to chop shop, I guess, about the Supreme Court decision there. Yeah.
So what initially I had umbrage with was your statement that the Supreme Court had thrown out the 14th Amendment, specifically Section 3, in the Trump v. Anderson case.
Yeah.
I would say, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I only occasionally view your content, but I believe that's wrong-headed because the Supreme Court didn't make it a dead letter. The Supreme Court stated that there are adjudicatory methods that the Congress should pass if they want to do it. And there are also common law methods to deal with disqualified or unqualified individuals taking office, specifically a writ quo warranto. And so I believe that the Supreme Court was correct in stating that a state court was incompetent to adjudicate the federal concern there, specifically for the office of the president. And so my position is that the case was correctly decided. I wish they would have explained a little more clearly that a writ quo warranto would be the proper method to do that. Now, some might say there's no federal common law, and therefore the common law method of a writ quo warranto doesn't apply, but a writ of mandamus isn't specified in the Constitution either. And Marbury versus Madison, in part, was deciding that the federal courts had the authority to issue, that common law remedy. So, I'm curious whether you believe that whether you support those words that the Supreme Court threw out the 14th Amendment.
Yeah. So when you say, for instance, like a writ is required to enforce any of this, what part of the amendment are you reading to get that idea?
Right. So what I would say is, and I don't have the text in front of me, but I know it almost verbatim.
Sure.
So it says that somebody is disqualified if engage in insurrection, et cetera, give comfort to those who support it, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And so, like almost every other provision of the Constitution, that pronouncement of law does not by itself and cannot by itself substantively produce an effect.
Wait. What law, or what are we talking about there?
I'm sorry, I'm talking about the 14th Amendment.
Yeah, but you said something about law, like implying that the Section 3 is talking about like the like adjudication of whether or not somebody committed a crime or something like that.
Sure. So in order for the constitutional bar to apply, there has to be some judicial method of testing whether someone has done the acts that preclude them from holding office.
Is there any other qualification listed in the Constitution or any other amendments that requires that adjudication process?
Well, you could point to, well, I'm sorry, ask that again. I'm sorry.
Like, do we have to go to court to prove somebody's age, or that like that's a required thing that has to happen in order to, or can a state just say you're not qualified? Like, doesn't every state have a right to figure out what their procedure is for whether or not somebody ought to be on a ballot or not?
So I don't disagree with, well, I think what's going to happen is you're going to find that I hold a different view on this. I believe that the age and natural born status and all that would require a writ quo warranto or some other method to determine whether that fact that would disqualify them is true.
But traditionally it hasn't, though, right? You can be kicked off a ballot by, like, I don't think you go to court to say that, like, if I were to try to run as a 10-year-old, I think the state just wouldn't put me on the ballot by whether it's their Secretary of State, whoever's in charge of their things, right? Like, and if there was a process there, it would be up to the state to do their procedure. Like you just mentioned adjudication, that's what Colorado did, right?
So I actually, for example, I think Cenk Uygur shouldn't have been kicked off the ballot by the states. I think there should have been some sort of adjudication to determine whether he was qualified. That might put me in a minority position here.
Sure. But, and while that's true, though, but very careful, adjudication by whom?
I believe it has to be a federal court of competent jurisdiction. I don't think that the state courts are competent to qualify or disqualify a federal office holder on those on a constitutional level.
That would be why, though? Because isn't a state basically allowed to do that? Like the whole process belongs to the state unless a particular statute has been passed by Congress saying otherwise, right?
Right. So you're talking about the time, manner, place of the election, right? And so time, manner, and place, I believe that I'd ask you where in that language you find that they have any power to determine qualification of the candidate per se, other than, and quite frankly, I'm in the minority here. I was going to challenge some of New York's laws on this because I don't think that some of these, I don't think the states have the power to disqualify candidates like this. However, the time and the manner of the election is a question that's wholly distinct from whether someone can assume the office. And
sure,
so
but
a lot
other
of states
constitutional qualifications, none of these other constitutional qualifications ever are adjudicated on some federal level. All of them are just relying on the state processes to figure out if somebody is qualified or not, according to language in the Constitution, right?
Not according to language in the Constitution. My understanding is, and I wish I had a little bit more time to brush up. You responded very quickly, and I give you kudos for that. Mm-hmm. So my understanding is that there is one case on point about maybe it was age or something like that. But generally speaking, the practice has been to allow the states to do this. However, a practice, no matter how long it's been going on or anything like that, doesn't necessarily mean that it is definitively constitutional law. And so Well, I mean, there's an argument on that too, but the point is that this is the first time that the Supreme Court has had the chance to answer questions related to disqualification pursuant to this or any other clause. I could be mistaken, but I researched this quite a bit over the summer. I just
well, but I mean, like, didn't other, like, after the Civil War, like, I think that there were federal congressional offices that states enforcing Section 3 didn't allow people to run for that particular office. Like, I don't think that.
But they had the 1870, the act that was the enforcement legislation for that provision. I think.
Wait. Wasn't that an act? That act, I thought that was as per Section 5. I thought that was remedying the injury that allowed those people to run. No? Like, I think that in the 14th Amendment, Section 5, or no, I'm sorry, actually. I think it was actually Section 3 itself might have said that in order to remedy this injury, the Congress can pass something to allow somebody to run for office or whatever.
Yes. So I think and I don't have the text in front of me, so forgive me, but I'm pretty sure that Section 5 says that, and Congress shall have the power, I think that, and those are the first few amendments that actually had that language in it.
Sure, but that Section 5 argument that I think Roberts uses is a dog shit argument because we didn't need Section 5 to enforce Section 1, right? Every single part of the Constitution is, in effect, law. We don't need an act from Congress unless it specifically says it's not law without an act from Congress to enforce it. And I believe that Brown v. Board was overturned because of the 14th Amendment, because of Section 1, and there was no law that needed to be passed to bring Section 1 into effect on a federal level for the Supreme Court to make that decision.
I'm sorry. I tend to talk fast too. Do you mind saying that a little bit slow? Because there are a few parts I want to unpack.
Sorry, when you bring up the requirement of a law part, that's the challenge to Section 3, that it's not self-executing. And then there was this weird fiction created that parts of the Constitution aren't self. Wait, what did I just say? It's not self-actuating.
Executing.
Yeah, that for some reason they aren't self-executing. But I mean, if the Constitution says this thing shall be, then it is. It's the Constitution. And Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, right, didn't require a law from Congress in order to have, like Brown v. Board of Education come out. So why would we assume that Section 3 would require a law from Congress? Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't believe that's the case. I think that we already have a long-established common law method to deal with this unqualified candidates from assuming their office, and that's the writ quo warranto. And so the way that works is a district court, federal district court, I think seated in D.C., has the power to issue a writ quo warranto upon sufficient evidence to remove somebody from an office that they have assumed that they are not qualified for.
I just don't know why we don't need that for any other qualification listed out in the, and you've got the time, manner, and place. Yeah, so I don't know why we would assume it to be the case here.
So how do we determine whether whether somebody has engaged in insurrections and is disqualified, therefore pursuant to that amendment? What is your method of determining that?
So that's a challenging question. And if the Supreme Court justices were breathing, constitutional, progressive, crazy people that the conservatives always claim that the lefties and the progressives are, then maybe that would be a good reason to throw out this decision. And that was part of it. I believe they said a patchwork of regulation or a patchwork of enforcement is what would make this bad. But the reality is how you would determine that, it would be determined at the state level, the same way that they enforce every single other qualification. Now, would it be challenging or difficult? Maybe, but then is that the conservative originalist argument that if a part of the Constitution is difficult to enforce, that we throw it out? Or
no, I think that we're having a semantic incongruence here. And so the qualification for office, I believe, is very different than somebody qualifying to be on the ballot for that office.
Is this a distinction that's made, though?
Well, we're getting outside of the decision, and we're getting more into like legal and constitutional theory here.
Well, sure, but this is where we should be. But I'm saying that, like, is there any state that would allow you to run like, I'm sorry, I would have to go back and check. Like, if I were to look up the age thing, the citizenship thing, and the naturalized citizen, or I'm sorry, and then the you can't be president for more than 2 terms. Do these specifically say they shall not be listed on a primary ballot?
Well, okay, so this is the big problem here.
Okay.
When we vote for president, there is no actual vote for that person to take office. There's a mediating body there. And so in theory, the way that it's supposed to work is you're voting for electors, and you're not even I'm against having bound electors and electors distributed according to,
that's
whatever.
fine, but also to be clear,
But
that's not in theory. That is what's happening, right? And keep in mind that the same people that were arguing about this Supreme Court case and that the federal Congress should have jurisdiction over these matters was also arguing for the independent state legislature theory, which makes these state legislatures even more powerful than they actually are, who are in charge of like picking the electors that you're voting for voting for president. So I mean, like the time, manner, and place clause, I mean, it seems plainly obvious to me, and it seems to be in the historical precedent of the U.S. that all of these restrictions on who can be on the ballot are enforced by the states, and we would expect them to do that, yeah?
So I see what you're saying. I think there are a couple differences here. So let's pull this apart.
Sure.
So, for example, we have in Virginia, to be on the ballot in Congress in a primary, you have to get 750 or 1,000 signatures to qualify for the ballot. And so that's ballot access.
Yep.
But on the other hand, you have...
Which, to be clear, just to be clear on that, that's requiring access to the ballot for 1,000 signatures for a federal office that is not authorized by congressional statute nor the Constitution. So that's precedence for a state determining how a person goes on a ballot, right? Yep.
Right. I agree with you that functionally is how it is. I do not think that you can add, this is personal opinion, and I don't know how well fleshed out it is legally in the case law, but personally, I think that there's a problem with that constitutionally because it places a qualification, and I don't like using the word qualification because qualifying for the ballot and being a qualified office holder are 2 different things, but they kind of get melded together procedurally because of the way we do it.
Yep.
So in terms of excluding Trump from the ballot, I do not believe that a state can determine that they have a 14th Amendment disqualification. Now, whether they choose to put him on the ballot, 1,000 votes, whatever, that's a different battle. The main question is, who has the capacity to determine, let's put aside getting on the ballot entirely.
Okay.
Right? Because it muddies the question. In terms of, in terms of somebody being qualified or disqualified, like flipping a switch, how is that person assuming that office to be adjudicated? Forget all of the previous steps in the Electoral College.
In whatever manner the state sees fit.
No. Forget the ballot part entirely. So is person A qualified to assume the office of president? And that's the only question on the table. Yay or nay? How is that determination made?
I mean, right now it could be made it could be made on January 6th when people are deciding whether or not they want to contest, I guess, the certification of a particular vote. I guess it could be made on January 20th. The Congress could impeach if they decide that this person is not a valid office holder.
They couldn't. That's not a high crime or misdemeanor, but you're thinking through it.
I don't think that high crimes and misdemeanors are clearly defined in any part of the Constitution. So I don't know if lying in a deposition about oral sex with Monica Lewinsky is a high crime or misdemeanor as well. I don't know but yeah. So I mean, like there are parts of the procedure where maybe the Congress could step in. However, again, while this is an interesting conversation, and I think there's a lot to be talked about here, fundamentally it doesn't matter, right? Like there could be a constitutional amendment that says in order for the president to be elected, he shall be able to bench press 100 pounds, right? And maybe there's a huge debate over, or like 135, and there's a huge debate over like, do you count 1 plate or 2 plates when you're adding up the weight? And that might be a general contention, who knows? But what's in the Constitution is in it, and as long as the text is plain and the text is clear, which it is here, then the enforcement mechanisms and procedures is a separate question entirely. Like if the argument is like, it's difficult to enforce this, we need to figure out how, that's fine. But it's never, especially the job of the Supreme Court, to say it's difficult to enforce this because it's a patchwork. Therefore, let's throw it out, right? You would agree that would be
but
a
that's
bad,
not what they. That's
that is
not
what they said.
though.
Yeah, of course it is what they said. Yeah.
No, what did they say? They said they said that this is not the method to do it. I think they advised the Congress to pass legislation to enforce it, but they didn't throw it out. That is still a constitutional bar.
It says. I mean, this isn't the in the opinion. The result could well be that a single candidate would be declared ineligible in some states, but not others, based on the same conduct and perhaps even the same factual record. The patchwork that would likely result from state enforcement would sever the direct link that the framers found so critical between the national government and the people of the United States as a whole. That's not an argument. It's basically just saying like it'd be sloppy, so we're going to just toss it out. That's an insane thing to say, in my opinion, when the text is clear. Now, if the text is unclear, then you move on to things like historical precedent, or how has it been seen traditionally, or what was the intention at the time. And there's three things I forgot. I'm sure you remember better than I do. But like when the text is clear and unambiguous, then the text is clear and unambiguous.
Right. So, but see, there's a problem here. And that is what is the mechanism to determine I guess the main question is, did person A engage in insurrection? Did they engage in insurrection? And so the ballot-based patchwork, that
question that you have is, you understand though, this is a question of procedure, not a question of constitutional law, right? There's a separate question.
Correct. Yeah. No. Yeah. This is not a substantive. Well,
but if this is a procedural question, then you've already granted me the entire constitutional argument. Now it's just a question of procedure. Perhaps states should pass laws for it. Perhaps the Congress can pass laws for it to streamline the process. But we're past the constitutional amendment now. We can't just say that because it'd be difficult procedurally, we'd throw out the amendment, which is what happened, right?
But no, that's not. I strongly disagree with you. They did not say that the 14th Amendment is null, void, and of no force or effect or anything like that. They said that this state cannot disqualify unilaterally on constitutional grounds this person.
Which is in contradiction to every other disqualification part of the Constitution, though.
And again, this is so I think that there's more to be threads to be pulled here.
Sure, you can think that, but like precedent-wise, there's nothing that can be your opinion, but there's no precedence in the United States for requiring federal government intervention to be listed on a ballot. It's just not the case, right? You can go forward to like the language of the 22nd Amendment is exactly the same, right? No person shall be elected to the office of president more than twice, right? So can they be listed on the ballots for presidency? I agree there's like a little bit of procedural maybe confusion there. Like, can you be listed on a ballot but not qualify for president? But like historically, we've never thought that like, well, maybe somebody could be listed on the ballot and it's the federal Congress that has to remove them from the ballot. That's just not the case. We don't need an enforcement mechanism. Like all language in the Constitution is self-executing unless we're led to believe otherwise. Like there's just no legal argument against this other than it feels bad.
Yeah, but has that been tested yet at the Supreme Court level, at a constitutional level? And I think this is the first time that such question has been answered by the federal court. So just because the federal courts haven't adjudicated it before doesn't mean that this first blush adjudication is invalid or incorrect just because it stands in opposition to practice and history.
Yeah, I never said it was incorrect, though, because it stands in opposition to practice history. I said it was incorrect because it is contrary to the clear and unambiguous text given to us by the Section 3 of the Constitution.
If Section 3 said that no person who has engaged in insurrection, etc., shall appear on a ballot for this office or for federal office or whatever, I would agree with you wholeheartedly.
Wait, but that's not our disagreement. Our disagreement isn't whether they can appear on the ballot. The disagreement that was listed in the Supreme Court case was whether or not a state can keep somebody from the ballot based on this, what they call a federal exception, right?
Okay. Right. And so, again, I think that we're getting into muddy territory on...
Wait. You say muddy territory. None of this is muddy. None of this is muddy at all, to be clear, right? We can say that there's a disagreement versus, like, are you on a ballot versus can you be elected? That can be a thing, but that's not related at all to this. Where a disagreement is not whether you can be listed on a ballot or not. It's can the state enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment? The Supreme Court has said no, and that seems to be unique to every single provision that would prevent somebody from appearing on a ballot or being elected to office, even when the language is identical, like it is in the 22nd Amendment.
All right. So again, I am standing in opposition to a long-standing history of the way that these have been adjudicated, such as age, for example. However, I would say that if you narrow it down to the most important, the most acute substantive issue, the question is, is this person qualified to assume and hold that office?
Yeah.
Which is a slightly different question than, is this person allowed to go through the process to then assume that office?
Sure.
Right. And so we're dealing with this lower level thing here, but the Constitution doesn't speak to qualification for a ballot. It speaks to holding the office itself.
Yeah, but do you believe this?
What do you mean?
What you just said, do you think that that's how it ought to be interpreted? My next question is going to be, do you think then that a state can list anybody that they want on the ballot because the enforcement shouldn't happen until the Congress goes to certify the candidate? So if I want to list people that are underage, under the age of 35, if I want to list people that are were president twice before, if I want to list people who are non-citizens, should states have the ability to do that? Because you're saying that it can't even be enforced because it only speaks to whether the person can hold office, not to whether they could be on a ballot?
I personally, I do.
And do you think, but now the important question is, do you think the Supreme Court, who said that this would create a patchwork of enforcement, would they agree with that?
Would they agree with that? I don't know. To be honest, this has not been brought to them. And I do think that if they start to pull at the thread of this and examine the relationship between constitutional qualifications to hold office versus appearing on the office, we might have a different result, because the way that our electoral system has evolved in the past 220 some years, we've developed a bunch of procedures that might not square neatly with the language of the Constitution.
I don't feel like that's true. I think everything scores away pretty easily. What do you think is unsolved for by?
So there can be no qualification on holding office other than those that are constitutionally listed.
Is that
right?
Wait, is that true?
Yes.
On holding office, but not on appearing on a ballot for holding office, or?
Right. No, so you cannot add to the qualifications or subtract from the qualifications for holding office different than those that appear in the Constitution. So, for example, it would be illegal for a state to say you have to have red hair and a beard to be a qualified candidate for Congress. That's unconstitutional. And so I actually would extend that same logic to say that requiring signatures or whatever other things that each individual state might impose, that's a problem there. But that's a separate question from, is that person qualified to hold the office under a federal and constitutional analysis?
Doesn't this violate, though, the states being allowed to determine how they hold their election?
How they hold the election, not who is. The states are making a preemptive determination on age and that sort of thing pursuant to the Constitution, but they're also making a secondary qualification on holding that office, i.e., you have to get 1,200 signatures from somebody to be elected to that office. And so I think there is a problem there. Now, it's never been tested in the courts. It's certainly never been tested at the Supreme Court level, but you cannot add qualifications beyond those that are in the Constitution for that office. The Congress can't pass a law saying you have to weigh 235 pounds or bench press 135. They can't add those qualifications. So I do think there is.
Is there a way? What is it? What part are we referencing here when we say like a state can't add qualifications or whatever? Or I mean, it's just a predicate of constitutional law. You cannot add qualifications on holding a constitutionally created office beyond those that exist in the Constitution. Okay, I'm not sure. I don't know how that would play out, because like if a state wanted to, a state could literally just not hold elections. No, like a state could literally because as we've said, it's really the electors of a state that vote, right? The state could just say we're not actually holding an election at all, and the electors can. Like an elector can probably just do a write-in candidate if he wants, or the state legislatures can just dictate to the electors. Actually, I don't know if that would violate the Constitution, if the state legislature could dictate to the electors who the electors vote for, but.
So, I'm sorry, ask the question again. I had a few thoughts that got tangled.
I guess I don't. States don't even have to technically hold elections inside their state, right? They really just have electors that vote for people. The states would just decided to hold elections to tell the electors who to vote for. But
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know, this idea that, like, I know that there are some qualifications that you wouldn't be able to put for president that would fail under, like, equal protections. Like, you couldn't say no black people on the ballot or no white people on the ballot or something. But I don't see how any part of this argument is... I was like backing up, like all of these things that are enforced at the state level, all of these things come from the Constitution. So I don't know why Section 3 is so much different. But you're saying that you feel if it was adjudicated that it would all be ruled differently.
I think that if somebody said black people couldn't, be a congressperson, that would fail on a number of constitutional grounds, equal protection, et cetera. But it would also be adding a qualification for the office that doesn't exist in the constitutionally created office in the Constitution. And it would fail on those grounds.
Oh, sure. Okay, yeah. But Section 3, I mean, it's part of the Constitution, right?
Right. Yeah.
So why wouldn't you be able to just exclude somebody based on what's in the Constitution?
Again, so we're mixing the qualification to hold the office and the qualification for the ballot, and I think we have to keep those two things separate in our minds.
Well, if you want to keep them separate, we can keep them separate, but those things are fundamentally different. Like, that's a fundamentally different discussion. I think, for all intents and purposes, I think that we agree, or I think that people agree that, like, whether you can appear on the ballot is going to be congruent with whether you can hold office, right? Like, I don't think any state is going to list somebody on a ballot who can't hold office because of some provision in the Constitution.
See, I just disagree with it. Let's come up with a hypothetical and just indulge me in it, if you would.
Sure.
So let's say somebody has forged a birth certificate and is actually 24, and they present to the state, their certification that's notarized that they're 25, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That person is not qualified to hold that office, but they have managed to qualify for the ballot.
Okay.
Now, if they get elected to that office and they have the disqualification constitutionally, that they are still not qualified to hold that office. And so the remedy would be that they are removed via writ quo warranto.
Removed how?
A writ quo warranto. That is a common law writ by the federal court of competent jurisdiction, probably the DC district court.
Sure. I don't know if this is 100%. I don't know 100% how this relates to it, but if I follow you on this, like, issuing that, so you're saying the federal government would have the authority to issue that, but after what process? That would have to be adjudicated, I imagine, right?
There would be some sort of court case. I don't know what the exact cause of action would be.
Now we're back on, well, the cause of action would be that it was violative of this part of the Constitution, right? But this writ quo warranto would only come after adjudication, I imagine, at a federal court. But now we're back on process and procedure again, right? Which, if you want to, again, I'm sympathetic to the idea that the process or the procedure is difficult, but that's the question of how do we enforce it, not should it be enforced, right? How do we enforce a thing versus should a thing be enforced are two fundamentally separate questions. I think the Supreme Court did this too, and I feel like it's happening here, where we're confusing the how do we enforce this, and it's confusing, therefore we shouldn't enforce it, which I think is unconstitutional, right?
See, I fundamentally disagree with you with your statement that the Supreme Court said that the 14th Amendment, Section 3 cannot be enforced.
Well, no, hold on.
That statement,
sure, that statement is not true. That is not what they said. That's a hyperbolic statement by me. What they said was that they required a law from Congress in order to enforce it, which is adding language to the amendment, which I think is not. I think that's not okay. I think
Can you provide me with the page number of that? I want to see exactly how they phrase that.
Hold on, let me. So I think I'm starting at around page 10. Instead, it is Congress that has long given effect to Section 3 with respect to would-be or existing federal office holders. Shortly after ratification of the amendment, Congress enacted the Enforcement Act of 1870. That act authorized federal district attorneys to bring civil actions in federal court to remove anyone holding non-legislative office, federal or state, in violation of Section 3, and made holding or attempting to hold office in violation of Section 3 a federal crime. In the years following ratification, the House and Senate exercised their unique powers under Article 1 to adjudicate challenges contending that certain prospective or sitting members could not take or retain their seats due to Section 3. And the Confiscation Act of 1862, which predated Section 3, effectively provided an additional procedure for enforcing disqualification. That law made engaging in insurrection or rebellion, among other acts, a federal crime punishable by disqualification from holding office under the United States. So this is giving examples of how the Congress has used laws to enforce Section 3 in the past.
Right. They're going to have an operative statement, and I'm looking for that, and I'm saving you some breath here from reading their, pedantic nonsense. Okay. More of a prediction. Okay. Because it limits congressional... Section 5 limits because to comply with it. Okay, we're almost there.
The final
content. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No, it's great content. We're doing all this reading bullshit.
Okay.
So if you look at the last paragraph of the opinion, all 9 members of the court agree with that result. Our colleagues, writing separately, further agree with many of the reasons this opinion provides for reaching it. So far as we can tell, they object only to our taking into account the distinctive way Section 3 works and the fact that Section 5 vests in Congress the power to enforce it. These are not the only reasons the states lack power to enforce this particular constitutional provision with respect to federal offices, but they are important ones, and it is the combination of all the reasons set forth in this opinion, not as some of our colleagues would have it, just one particular rationale that resolves this case. So they're saying that only the Congress can pass laws basically doing something.
Right. So what they're saying, they did not say that the 14th Amendment cannot be enforced. They're saying that state courts and the state governments are not competent to enforce this disqualification.
Does competent mean something different legally here? Or when you say competent, do you just mean like jurisdictionally?
Jurisdiction.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I try not to speak in legalese, but sometimes it sneaks out.
That's fine. Yeah. Okay. That might be what they're saying. And I agree that that's what they're saying. I think I said that's what they were saying. But then my issue is we don't feel this way with any other constitutional requirement to be listed on a ballot for president.
See, I mean, and I say that last bit one more time. I'm sorry.
No other constitutional requirement is treated the same way. This one is being treated uniquely compared to every other constitutional requirement to be president of the United States.
Okay. Right. So I don't necessarily disagree with you on that. I think that there's a qualitative reason for that. And so again, I have a problem with states doing the preemptive work to disqualify somebody from the ballot on the grounds that they're disqualified federally. And I think that
but that's what every single state does with every single qualification.
I'm not disagreeing with you. And I think, let me ask you this, would you disagree that if we follow their logic all the way to the end, that the state doesn't have the power to keep somebody off the ballot if they're 21?
Correct.
Right. Okay. Right. So we're in agreement there. And
I don't think the Supreme Court would say that if it were to come to, if somebody were to run for president who's 30 and a state was like, well, we're not listing you on the ballot, and they were to challenge this up to the Supreme Court, I don't even think they'd take the case. They would just laugh at it and hand wave it.
But I don't disagree with you.
Well, but then it's hypocritical. Then they're not applying the law fairly and evenly like a Supreme Court judge probably ought to, no?
If I were the Chief Justice, I would say we got to take this case. But I don't disagree with you that functionally that's the way that it would be, the outcome would be. But I think that we have to get back to your claim was that I think you said threw out the 14th Amendment.
Yeah.
Section 3. And sure. I don't find that in here.
Yeah, they didn't throw it out. I'm being hyperbolic when I say that. They didn't necessarily throw it out. But they have basically made it separate from the way that every other constitutional requirement has been enforced when it comes to keeping someone on the ballot. So in effect, they've thrown it out because there's never going to be a Congress that's going to pass legislation to keep like a particular candidate off the ballot. So in effect, it's basically defunct now.
I disagree with you. If it came out that somebody was actually 32 or, let's say 27 and a senator, there would be a writ quo warranto issued and that person would be removed from office.
Issued by who?
There would be I assume it's the district court.
Oh wait, you're saying
DC.
if they've already been elected
assumed
to office?
yes.
Sure,
so
but wait, but that's not. We're not talking about that at all. That's no question for anything. That's once they've already passed all of these qualifications, right? We're talking about to be listed.
So I disagree with you. You're calling. I guess I assume you're saying being elected to that office counts as a qualification for that office. In that.
No. I'm saying we're doing. Okay, this happens a lot. I don't know why this is happening. You're getting hung up on process and procedure. I have no issue. We can talk process and procedure. That's fundamentally different than the law. They've changed the law because they think that the procedure is difficult. That's what's happening. But now when you're talking to me about like how would you get rid of somebody who didn't qualify for an office, well, there's a number of ways we could imagine them. And yeah, issuing a warrant from a court could be a way to do it. Maybe there's a subcommittee in the House or the Senate that does it, or maybe there's some order, whatever. Maybe but that's not an interesting question. It's not an important question, and it's not it's not the question of the law, which is what this question was supposed to address, right?
See, I think that maybe we're talking past each other on this. I think that let's forget all procedure. And again, back to the light switch. Is this person qualified to hold office or not? Mm-hmm. What is the method to determine simply qualification under the Constitution, irrespective of elections?
None of that is listed in the Constitution, so the assumption would be that it's left up to the states. Absent.
No.
Why?
No.
We literally have a federal government of enumerated powers or whatever. Or no?
No, because if somebody is disqualified from being in that office, does Colorado have the right to send a federal agent, or a state agent to Congress and tell them to leave?
No. But you're talking once they've been elected and have assumed office. Once they've assumed office, it's out of obviously the jurisdiction of a state. But we're talking about access to a ballot and to be elected by the state. Like, how can they keep somebody off of a ballot, right?
Right. And so I think I can tie this all together here. I don't like doing it, but we're going to do it just for the purposes of having a good substantive discussion, which, by the way, this is meant, and I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. So the disqualification for the office, so this is the office part. Here's the constitutional question. They're saying you do not meet this criteria here, so we're severing your ability to access the rest of this to get there.
Correct.
And so the question is, does the state court have the capacity to answer this question up here that empowers them to sever the rest of the connection between that person and the office? Does the state have the power to unilaterally determine that this person is disqualified on a constitutional ground, thereby enabling the state to come in and sever the electoral connection?
Yeah. And actually, we can think of this very simply. Not only do they, because they do for every other thing, if they didn't, you would effectively be saying that the states don't have the power to enforce any access to the ballot as far as the Constitution is listed, because then at this point, you're basically saying that the only remedy for this situation is adjudication in a federal court once the person has been elected to office. Isn't that like the alternative to what you're suggesting? If you're saying that a state can never control ballot access, well, then what do they control? Does that mean that you necessarily... So let's say that somebody, let's say Obama wants to run for president again. By your logic, states are required to place him on the ballot, and the only remedy we would have is once he assumes office, then the federal courts can do something about it, which is... And I mean, like, the federal courts are under the president, right? So that's already a very... Actually, yeah, that's self-defeating. That wouldn't even be possible, right? So...
Well, I mean, obviously Trump has appointed his judges, et cetera. But, I mean, I get what you're saying. It's messy.
No, not judges, because the judges would have no say in this, right?
Yes, they would.
Why?
They would have a say in adjudicating the claim as to whether
adjudicating the claim. Wait, adjudicating the claim. Yes, but who's bringing the claim? It's federal standing, so it'd have to be a federal court. It'd have to be a federal prosecutor, which exists as part of the Department of Justice, which is under the executive branch. So you'd be relying on the president's Department of Justice bringing this claim to a federal court against himself. No,
this would be civil, not criminal. So if it was criminal. If for whatever reason holding office that you weren't allowed to hold was criminal, then yes, it'd be a prosecutor.
How would it be
in the
civil?
DOJ.
Who would have standing for a civil case of this?
And so it would probably be the losing candidate or something. And would have standing. I think that the federal standing rules are problematic too, but that's another discussion entirely. So it would probably be the candidate who lost the election
would have standing to bring a constitutional challenge to a person being on a ballot.
Not on the ballot, assuming the office.
Assuming the office. I don't know what individual. I don't know. I mean, obviously this is all like hypothetical, untested law, but I don't know why they would have standing to bring that case. It's not like.
Because the federal, I dislike the federal standing rules. It causes a whole lot of other corollary problems other than this one that we're discussing right now. But let's just assume that by statute, the losing candidate has the right to challenge.
Well, sure, but now we've assumed away the hard part. Obviously, if Congress passed a law for something, then sure. Like backing up from all of this, it seems like the obvious answer is just you have to control access to the ballot. Because that's the only way. Like here's an example. Let's say that I am 34 and I run for president and I lied on my thing, and then I get elected president, and now I'm 35 and somebody wants to challenge me being in office. Why? I'm qualified. I am 35 years old now, right?
So ask that again. I'm sorry, I was thinking.
Yeah, let's say that I turn 35 while I'm in office, and now I am qualified to hold office. So now you can't remove me from office because I know that
it'd be moot at that point. Once you turn 25, there'd be no adjudicable issue.
Yeah, but like this is obviously kind of nonsensy, right? Like this wouldn't work in practice, right? Because now we'd be encouraging people to try to run for office and get there just so that they could be president and then either outlast whatever the qualifying things are, whatever. Like.
And so look, I mean, I love the Constitution, but I don't think that it's infallible down to the last detail.
We're not saying it's infallible down to the last detail. This is very clear and plain and obvious. I feel like this is only complicated because we're making it complicated because we wanted Trump to be on the ballot, right? Otherwise, I think this is like pretty clear and unambiguous. Nobody looks at the 22nd Amendment and thinks like, well, it says no person shall be elected to the office. It doesn't say anything about that being on the ballot, so we can have them on the ballot and then they get elected, and then it's up to Congress to address.
Does it say elected or hold? I don't know. And I'm not trying to be difficult.
No, sure. It says no person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice, and no person who has held the office of president or acted for more than 2 terms to which some of the shall be elected to the office.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't being difficult, but the language made a difference, but it doesn't matter because I was wrong. So I don't disagree with you that kind of the consequences of following this train of logic to its natural conclusion results in a mess. I don't disagree with you on that. I think that that's a function of the way that the Constitution, et cetera, is written, and states have power to do the not the time. I don't even think they have the time, but it's the manner in which their elections are held. And so to read into that empowerment of the states that they have the power to exclude the president from the ballot when the president isn't even on the ballot. Nobody has ever voted for Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Do we agree on that?
No person has?
No person in the history of the United States.
I'm going to disagree with you incredibly semantically, and I will say, yes, they have, because the electors are people. But I understand what you're saying. Yes.
Right. And so in theory, the person to assume the office of the president isn't even on the ballot.
Sure.
Nobody has ever.
They're not on the ballot for the citizens of a state, right? They are on the ballot for the electors, though. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so maybe there's something where the court says that the electors can't vote for this person because they're disqualified. But I think that we've got ourselves into a big mess in terms of practice, as you keep referring to. Well, the practice is if they're not old enough, they don't get on the ballot. The state determines that. We have a big problem with practice that's built up over the years because we all of a sudden assume that we vote for president when nobody has ever actually cast a vote that in a substantive way for anybody for president.
Like, what else has this ever resulted in a problem in, though? Like, I don't see all these problems resulting from this. It feels like people are just mad here because they wanted Trump to be on the ballot.
Well, I don't want Trump on the ballot. I want the electors to be on the ballot. And
no, I'm saying on the electors' ballot. That's the only reason why this is a problem. Otherwise, I don't see all these issues where people are like, oh, God, can we really exclude somebody from the ballot because they're 30 years old? California didn't have an issue doing it with Cenk, as you pointed out. I'm sure other people have been excluded from ballots for a number of reasons. But Like, this just
I
wasn't a
don't
problem for anybody else ever. Like, it seems like, well, you're saying that this is a huge problem because of all of these issues. I don't think it was a problem until it affected Trump, and now it's a problem.
No, I hear you. I totally. I'll even cede that side of the argument that it has only been brought to the fore in this context because Trump, as a human being, and Trump as a candidate for president. I don't disagree with you. This is a unique iteration of this.